Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson here with Oscar, Emmy, and Tony winner Dame Helen Mirren, who stars as Golda Meir and Guy Nattiv's Golda. Helen, Golda was a very misunderstood person throughout history. She was the first prime minister of Israel, but as your director pointed out in an interview, she was sort of known as the worst prime minister until all these declassified documents came out and people really understood what actually happened during that war in 1973. What did you know about her at the time she was in power? And then how did you come to this point where you wanted to portray her in a film?
Well, I didn't really know a lot about her in power. I mean, all I knew was when she came to power, it was an incredibly important moment for me as a woman to realize that women could be prime ministers. It was an unknown thing in those days. Now it's completely accepted, but it was completely unaccepted. In the days that in the era when Golda came to power, and it was absolutely revelatory. It was incredibly important moment for me to realize what women could do, sort of thing. And then the ins and outs of her actual time in power, I wasn't aware of. Of course, I was aware of the Yom Kippur War, but I didn't fully grasp at the time, the importance of the Yom Kippur War. It's only since obviously studying Golda and studying, being a part of the film that I came to understand really the incredible importance of the Yom Kippur War. I thought, yes, it was very, very interesting that I think being a woman, I don't think, I don't know, maybe you will tell me, but I don't think the rest of her time in power, she was particularly thought of as a terrible prime minister. It was just the Yom Kippur War, which was so traumatic for the Israeli people. And the thing that I never grasped until I did the film was the proportion of the population that were lost in the Yom Kippur War. A big part of the youth of Israel at the time were lost in the Yom Kippur War, and it was profoundly traumatic for that very small nation. And I just hadn't sort of grasped the importance of the numbers, there.
We
But
see that scene of her looking at the coffins too. I mean, that's
yes,
a
very
powerful
important
moment in
scene,
the film.
absolutely. And she did take note of every single person who was killed in the Yom Kippur and took it profoundly to heart. She was not playing war games remotely. It was a war that was forced upon her by the invasion by the Egyptians. And not dissimilar to what has happened recently, she was given bad information,
Yeah.
this is what has been revealed recently with the release of the secret papers.
And you really couldn't
So
have.
I think that a guy was saying, and he knows all of this much more deeply than I do, but that has really made people reassess Golda in the light of that.
I understand Golda's grandson was quite supportive of the film and was someone who helped bring up some background not only on who she was, but how she looked. I spoke with the hair and makeup designer, and she explained how she learned how to do Golda's hair just right from her grandson. What benefit was he to have for you in getting to know
Oh,
Golda?
that was
Yeah.
enormously important to have that support for me to play Golda, as and for the film in general. It was absolutely essential, because if he'd been against us, then I would never have done it. But no, very, very important. We didn't see him, it wasn't like he was on set all the time and we were referring to him all the time. He let us be and let us do what we were doing. He visited once, but we had our writer was Nicholas was fantastically well, versed in his research. He was invaluable, especially in terms of all the war stuff, which was very complicated.
I was not familiar with her history. This movie really made me look into so much more about her. I didn't realize she grew up in Milwaukee. I
I
mean,
know, yeah,
and
absolutely.
then and
Why
what an
she always
interesting
had an
cast.
American accent. Her Hebrew was always a little bit dodgy, actually,
So I was
but
curious about the dialect, and were you conscious about getting that just right?
oh, absolutely. No, I worked very much so. Her voice was very distinctive and a very specific kind of American accent. So yes, I worked with a dialect coach, and I would have, my makeup would take 2 hours, maybe more, 2 to 3 hours. So I would sit listening to Golda, just listening to her voice for those hours to prepare myself. But no, her voice was, I mean, she was extremely visually a very distinctive person, and anybody playing Golda would have to change their look to a certain extent, because no one quite looked like Golda. Just uh, uh, her hair, her eyebrows, her body shape, her legs, everything was so distinctive, and of course a very distinctive voice.
Were you nervous about the prosthetics and just being able to move your face and emote? I mean, does that concern you as an actress? That's obviously a
Very
very
much so.
part of
I don't. If you can manage the role without that sort of tool, um, so much the better. Um, but sometimes you absolutely have to have it, and it would have been absurd if it had been me, with Golda's hair, and I was very nervous because I'd never done anything like that before. I'd used a little bit of prosthetics here and there with various roles, but that sort of real utter transformation. And I have to say, these two girls, young girls who'd had a prosthetics, they just started their own prosthetics company, and they were incredible. They were fantastic, these two girls. But once I was in it, no, because now it's silicon, it's not latex. So people keep saying latex, it's not latex, it's silicon. And it absolutely moves and there were many different pieces. So it wasn't like one thing. It wasn't a mask, it was many pieces. And no, once it was on, I felt it absolutely became a part of my skin. I felt very natural within it. I didn't feel imprisoned remotely.
And how many cigarettes did you have to smoke? I
Oh
mean,
God, that was
she's smoking nonstop.
oh, she did. She was like 80 a day person. The minute she woke up, the cigarette got lit. Um, that was difficult because I don't smoke. Of course, they weren't real cigarettes. They were herbal cigarettes, but still, you're inhaling smoke into your lungs, and it's that made me feel ill. Yeah.
It's also, smokers are very natural. So it's still a part of acting too. You had to make it look like you were a
Very
genuine.
much so. And I've had to play smokers before, and I learned that as long as there's like 2 or 3 shots where you can absolutely see the person inhaling rather than just holding and puffing sort of thing, if you see that just once or twice, it sells the fact that you smoke. So that was what I did. I chose the moments where you would actually see her inhale, and I just do, 2 or 3 takes of that.
She's also not someone we think of now when we think of an elected official. She was not glamorous in any way. So,
No,
um,
no.
to talk about just her being herself. I mean, she sort of was just like, this is who I am, and she still rose to this level.
You're absolutely right. She did it she was incredibly charming. Oh, clearly, when she wanted to be, she could be very charming. She was very, very smart, very, very engaging. Israel, she was instrumental profoundly instrumental in the creation of Israel. You know, she had a famous trip to America because she spoke English, American English. She raised vast sums of money and basically was the creator of the relationship between America, the Jewish population in America, and America itself with Israel. She created that relationship, which has been so important to the history of Israel. And that was Golda that did that. So she, you know, in many ways, she was responsible for the creation of Israel. She rather like I found similarities in that sense between her and Elizabeth I that I played. It is that absolute dedication. Above all, nothing else matters but your commitment to your country, and Golda had that. And as you say, she didn't do it by, you know, power suits or, you know, she was absolutely authentically herself. But you see, there's a little interview, not a little piece of film of her at the end of the Yom Kippur War, when they've made it up with Egypt. And, you know, that is if there's any reason to be optimistic about what's happening in that part of the world now, it is the way that Egypt and Israel found an accord with each other and that lasted, that accord. But you can see her charming Sadat. You know, they've been at war, and they're sort of he's utterly charmed by her. He finds her very funny. But yes, she just did it by her wit, by her. She didn't employ any other, you know, nefarious means of charming people.
You've played so many characters, real and fictional. You know, how do you go into a role in playing someone we've seen footage of, like the Queen, or Golda, versus sort of having the freedom to create your own character? I mean, is it a different?
Yes, it's a huge difference. So you have to look like, walk like, talk like the person you're playing. You have to do that. And the terrible thing is, you'll only ever be, if you're lucky, 60% as good as the real person, you know. So in a way, you know, you're on a losing ticket. But then the way I find to liberate myself from my, you know, insecurity about that, is to think of myself as an artist, like an artist paints a portrait of a person. As you, of course, you see the person, and you see, and they hopefully look like the person, but also it's the artist's interpretation of that person, and therefore the artist is there in the portrait as much as the person who's being painted. So that was how I think of it when I do these real life characters. I'm an artist, I'm a portraitist. I'm doing my portrait, and someone else's portrait might be different. They might see different things in this person. They will approach it in a different way, but this is you know, I get the chance to do this. So this is my version, my portrait. And therefore there is me in it as well as the person themselves.
And how was it working with Guy Nattiv, who won an Oscar for one of my favorite short films, Skin?
Yes,
That stuck with
incredible
me.
film.
That stuck
Yeah.
with me. What was he like to work with as a director? This wasn't a big budget. I mean, you were very
No, very
successful in
small
what you did.
budget. But you know, we like working on small budget movies. You know, it's tough for the director because he doesn't have the resources he needs sometimes, and he's fighting, you know, time and money, and it's tough. But at the same time, you have a sense of community and commitment when you're doing a small film. You're all, you know, you're all in it for the same reason, and you're all fighting the good fight together. So you know, that was great. I loved that. we were shooting in a school, a decommissioned Hindu school in North London. It couldn't be more like not Israel. But you know, it's amazing how you can transform these spaces. And what was remarkable about Guy is he, you know, he hasn't got a sort of whole history of films behind him, but he had his vision, and he was going to make his vision. He knew, you know, and I thought that was very, very admirable. His use of macro lenses, which was extraordinary for me, you know, with wearing prosthetic, but of course it was very clever because it meant you didn't question the prosthetics. And just the rhythm of it. It was very much Guy's film. He wasn't just a sort of traffic cop. It was his vision.
And just to pivot, we're an awards website. I have to mention you just received your 17th Golden Globe nomination.
Oh, really? Gosh. I had no idea I had that many.
It's an incredible number. This is for 1923. So
yeah.
Congratulations on that. How was it like working with Harrison Ford?
Oh, you know, as I sent a message somewhere saying my husband in another life, sort of thing. No, he's great. I mean, his it's amazing working with someone like Harrison. Of course, there's not many people like Harrison. Maybe there's only Harrison like Harrison. I was going to say someone who's been a huge movie star for such a long period of time, who still works with such commitment and energy and you know, not humbleness. That's not the right word, but he's just on it. He's great. He's great.
I think one of the craziest Golden Globe stories is 2007. You went in with 3 nominations. You won for The Queen on the film side, and then you beat yourself in TV. You won for Elizabeth I, and you were nominated in the exact same category for Prime Suspect: The Final Act. That had to be one of like the wildest nights for you.
I didn't realize. I'd forgotten that I'd been nominated in both categories. So it's never a good thing, that, because you know you get cancelled out. So oh, that was funny. Yes. Unfortunately, because it was the Golden Globes, I got a little bit drunk that night. So I think when I stood up to say thank you for one Elizabeth, I was, you know, I got the wrong Elizabeth. Because they were both Elizabeth, you know, Elizabeth I and Elizabeth II.
What was your first major like American awards show you attended? Was it the Emmy for Prime Suspect in 93 or the Oscar for The Madness of King George in 95? Or what do you remember about going to your first huge, big major awards show?
The very first one was I was nominated for a supporting role. And maybe it was The Madness of King George. I think you might be right. It was utterly overwhelming, the whole experience. Yeah. I sort of thought I was going to a wedding. I decided to wear a hat because in England, you know, you go to posh events, you wear your wedding or ascot or something posh. You wear a hat. So I thought, oh, I've got to have a hat. Which is incredibly stupid. Nobody else was wearing a hat. I looked like an idiot. But the whole thing, oh my God, it's just so exciting and so overwhelming. And the first time you experience, because you know, you've got hundreds of photographers, and then you've got these bleachers all full of people shouting, you know, everybody else's name, not yours. But very, very exciting. And then sitting in the room, and everywhere you look, there's some fantastic movie star, you know, looking amazing because everybody's done up to the nines. So they all look absolutely incredible. And they all seem to be very tall. And I found myself on the red carpet between Nicole Kidman and Christine Lahti, who are both very tall, slim, beautiful, tall women. and I was like this dumpy little thing in between them. I couldn't even sew, you know, so I was so low. So I learned from that moment on, I had to wear very high heels whenever I was on the red carpet to bring me up to their level.
And you started in theater, and so you have this incredible history in film and television. Was there a movie star that you loved when you were younger to watch, or anyone in particular that you looked up to, like, oh, I want to do that?
Well, I have to say it was the European movie actresses that I
Oh,
absolutely love. Anna Magnani, number one, top of the heap, always. Then Monica Vitti, Claudina Cardinale, Jean Moreau, very much Jean Moreau, Simone Signoret. Those sorts of actresses were the ones that caught my imagination, and I looked at them thinking, oh, I want to be French
and then you
or
decided to,
Italian, one or the other, but I don't want to be English.
but you decided to make that switch. So what inspired that
The switch to,
to film and TV? Because you wanted to really be a theater.
oh yes, I did. No, you're right. I wanted to. That was my inspiration, and my sense of being an artist was theatre, absolutely, and I still have that deep in my heart. But then I realized after about 6, 8 years of doing theatre that there was this whole other world of acting. And of course, as I said, I loved European film. I wasn't particularly enamored with American film. I didn't. And English film at that time was terrible. It was just awful. So I didn't. The material was not really very interesting to me in movies in that era for women, and it wasn't. It was awful. It was boring. You know, but then Prime Suspect came along, and that was great. And that wasn't boring. That was a great character Linda LaPlante created, really fabulous female character, and a trailblazer.
And what fabulous female characters you've been able to play. I mean, since then. So, I mean, Golda being one of them. Congratulations on this film and getting this story out there. It's such an important film. Thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. That was great. Thank you.